Yo, what's up? Welcome back to another episode of the Swiss College Football Week 7 continues. Friday night, we got 3 games, a little bit higher quality than last night's games, but hey, let's not go shitting on Conference USA. 3 games, going to go through all 3. Let's do it.
Welcome to the Swiss. The Swiss. Hey, get the Swiss.
First up, we're in the Big Ten. We got Northwestern on the road at Maryland here. Terps are laying 10.5 or 11, depending on your sports book. It was at 10. Looks like it's been bought up a bit. Total sitting at pretty much 45.5 across the board. Let's take a look at the pie charts, and according to this data, action's coming in pretty split. Looks like it was coming in on Maryland earlier in the week. Looks to be closer to 50-50 now. As I always say, take this data with a grain of salt. So let's get into this matchup, and we'll start with some head-to-head history. Northwestern is 3-1 in their last 4 matchups against Maryland, and they're 4-0 against the number. So in the Northwestern-Maryland rivalry, I guess you can call it, if you've been betting Northwestern, you are cashing out here. But we're not interested in the past. Let's talk about this matchup. We'll start with the Northwestern offense, and it's been a struggle, man. Obviously, we've seen a quarterback change. We'll talk about that in a second. On the season, they're just 126th in yards per play, 104th in success rate, 125th in PPA, sitting at 110th in OFEI. Passing attack has not been there, although we are seeing a little bit of an improvement now that they made the switch over to Lausch. Not that the numbers look great. I mean, in the 3 games since Lausch has taken over at quarterback, they're averaging just 5.37 yards per pass attempt as a team, 34.5% success rate per dropback, 181 passing yards per game. So it hasn't been good, but I will say in their last game against Indiana, I had Northwestern plus 16.5, so I happened to be watching that game. By the way, heartbreaking that lost. It was a 3-point game with 6 minutes left. I had Northwestern plus 16.5. It lost by the hook. I was sick about that. But anyway, I'm getting sidetracked here. So I happened to be watching that game, and look, Lausch was making plays. It wasn't a bad performance at all. 23 of 38, 243 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks, 131.6 passer rating in the game. I'm not saying he set the world on fire, but Indiana is a tougher defense, and he was capable of moving the ball here and there. So I think as a whole, this Northwestern offense is better with Lausch at quarterback. So what kind of matchup does he have here against the Maryland defense? Well, that Maryland defensive front is pretty good. We expected it to be good entering the season. They brought back a lot of production from last year. Solid numbers against the run. 38th in yards per carry, 79th in success rate, 21st in effective rush. Numbers against the pass are a little bit shaky. 105th in yards per pass attempt allowed, 64th in success rate per dropback, 57th in effective pass. What might be skewing the Maryland pass defense numbers a bit is their last game. I mean, Indiana threw the ball all over Maryland. Both these teams are coming off games against Indiana, by the way. Indiana against the Terps, 359 yards through the air, 10.9 yards per attempt, 55.6% success rate per dropback. Maryland had 0 answers to the Indiana passing attack. Now, their numbers against the pass in their other 4 games actually look pretty good. 6.85 yards per attempt, 34.7% success rate per dropback. These are solid stats here. Yes, I'm aware there's a UConn game and a Villanova game in here. I'm aware of that. But there's also Michigan State and Virginia, 2 solid passing attacks. So for the most part, this Maryland pass defense has looked pretty good. Aiden Childs was able to make some plays on them at the end of that game. But as a whole, Childs wasn't really piecing them up like that. Wasn't very efficient. He just made a couple big plays, that's all. So you might be thinking, well, there's no way Jack Lausch is able to throw the ball on this Maryland defense. But hold on. I mentioned before how the strength of this Maryland defense is their defensive front, right? Secondary is a little shaky. One thing Northwestern does, and look, their offense doesn't have many strengths. They've actually done a good job in pass protection. 60th in pressure rate allowed, 26th in sack rate, 18th in pass blocking grade. The reason that's significant, the pass rush is Maryland's main weapon against the pass. If that pass rush isn't getting home, could expose Maryland's secondary, which is the weakness of their defense. So look, I'm not saying Jack Lausch is going to light Maryland's secondary up, but I honestly think he will be able to make some plays. The problem in this game for Northwestern's offense is, are they going to be able to run the football? Yeah, I said I expect Jack Lausch to make some plays through the air, but he's not going to compete with this Maryland team solely on his arm. He's going to need run support, and I'm not sure if it's going to be there. In their 4 games against FBS teams, Northwestern is averaging just 3.72 yards per carry, just a 38.6% success rate. The run game hasn't been very efficient. Now, granted, let's cut Northwestern a little bit of slack here. Look at the opponents. Miami of Ohio is probably the best defense in the MAC, or one of the best. Duke, that's a solid ACC defense. Washington's got a pretty good defense. Indiana, we know how good they've been. So yeah, they've been through a bit of a gauntlet in terms of run defenses that they've seen, and their rushing attack is probably better than this. But it's not like that changes here. They're playing Maryland. That defensive front has been good as hell all year. They're actually only allowing 3.46 yards per carry on the season, just 113.4 rushing yards per game. Maybe you can point at their last two FBS games against Virginia and Indiana and say, hey, 49.1% success rate on the ground. So, I mean, indicates that 3.81 isn't an accurate indication of how they were getting run on. But still, I mean, Northwestern's rushing attack, the Northwestern offense is not on the level of Virginia or Indiana. So I don't think we can count on the run game being there. And even though I don't hate the matchup for Jack Lausch, I think Maryland's defense should give him problems. But what about the other side of the ball? Let's take a look at the matchup for Maryland's offense, and not what I was expecting to see this year. With Tagovailoa leaving, I thought they were going to run the ball this year. Turns out Billy Edwards Jr. is the man. They're still throwing the ball a lot. They're 9th in pace, 36th in pass frequency. Numbers look great. 46th in yards per pass attempt, 33rd in success rate per dropback, 18th in effective pass. Run game's actually been a little disappointing, but this Maryland offense is still sitting at 34th in OFEI. My main criticism of Billy Edwards Jr. and the Maryland passing attack, they kind of did all their damage against the two shitty opponents they've seen. Against Power 5 opponents, Michigan State, Virginia, and Indiana, just 268.3 passing yards per game, 6.83 yards per attempt, 42.4% success rate per dropback. Those numbers aren't anything special. In fact, a little bit underwhelming. Look at their numbers in the UConn and Villanova games. 359.5 passing yards per game, over 10 yards per attempt, 55.5% success rate per dropback. So yeah, Maryland's passing numbers on the season look elite, but they did most of their damage against UConn and Villanova. When they actually saw decent Power 4 defenses, that passing attack looked a lot different. That being said, we're about to talk about the Northwestern pass defense, and you could say the same exact thing. They racked up elite pass defense numbers against Miami of Ohio and Eastern Illinois. Now look at their pass defense numbers in their other three games against Duke, Washington, and Indiana. 8.63 yards per attempt, 57.6% success rate per dropback. So when they actually saw quarterbacks, pass defense didn't look good at all. That being said, I did watch most of the Duke game. Northwestern's defense actually played a great game for about 3.5 quarters. Pass rush was getting home. Duke really couldn't do much. Then, I mean, like I said, second half of the fourth quarter, I don't know if the pass rush got tired, but they stopped getting home. Malik Murphy immediately drove up and down the field, forced overtime, and won the game. But, I mean, obviously the numbers look bad, but the Northwestern defense did look really good in the Duke game. Regardless, though, numbers don't lie. I mean, the 3 times they've seen decent offenses, the pass defense didn't look great. On the season, they're 83rd in yards per pass attempt allowed, 126th in success rate per dropback, 75th in effective pass. These are not good-looking numbers here. Now, the only excuse you can make for Northwestern is they have seen a decent schedule so far. In terms of effective pass, their easy game, well, obviously their easy game was Eastern Illinois, FCS program. But Miami of Ohio, they've got Gabbert. They've actually got a quarterback. Duke's got Malik Murphy. They have a quarterback. Washington, obviously, Will Rogers. Indiana, Curtis Rourke. So, I mean, they have seen a lot of quarterbacks. So maybe when they start seeing some offenses that don't have quarterbacks, the pass defense numbers will start to look better. But, I mean, Billy Edwards can throw it. What Northwestern needs to do defensively in this game is generate pressure. Personally, I think they are able to do it. I don't think the Maryland offensive line is very good. Northwestern on the season, just 81st in pressure rate, but they are 63rd in pass rush grade. Maryland's offensive line has not done a good job in pass protection. 127th in pass blocking grade, 105th in pressure rate allowed. So I do think Northwestern's able to cause some problems here, and it's not like Maryland's going to have any run support for Billy Edwards Jr. I mean, they don't really run the ball. Against Power 4 opponents, just 3.33 yards per carry, 108.7 rushing yards per game. This is not a dynamic rushing attack. This is an offense that needs to throw the ball. Just like their passing stats, they racked up all of their solid rushing attacks against bad opponents. UConn and Villanova, they went off. Northwestern's been the lead against the run all year, allowing just 3.15 yards per carry on the season, 38% success rate. So Maryland's probably not going to be able to run the ball in this game. I think Northwestern is able to generate a little bit of pressure. Is that enough to cover the number? I don't know. I just got smoked on Northwestern plus 16.5 last weekend. I really don't like how they're playing another offense that can throw the ball because this Northwestern defense specializes in stopping the run. So Maryland, not a great matchup for them defensively. So I guess the only way I could go is Maryland, but very seriously doubt I place a bet here. It'll be Maryland minus 10.5 or pass. Next game. We're in the Mountain West next. We got UNLV on the road at Utah State. Utah State catching 19, mostly 19.5. I actually see an 18.5. So anywhere in between 18.5 and 19.5. Total sitting at 66.5 pretty much across the board. Let's take a look at the pie charts, and according to this data, the action was coming in on Utah State, but is now on UNLV. Over 50% of the tickets, over 65% of the money. As I always say, take this data with a grain of salt. So let's take a look at this matchup. UNLV did win the last one. 34-24 was the final score. Before that, Utah State had taken 5 straight. UNLV 4-2 against the spread in their last 6 meetings. But we're not interested in last year. We want to talk about this year. So let's start by taking a look at the UNLV offense here. 4th in run frequency so far this season. Obviously, we know this UNLV offense loves to run the ball. They have been passing it a little more now that since Malik Williams took over, and we'll talk about that in a second. Here are their numbers on the year. 46th in yards per play, 34th in success rate, 22nd in PPA. They're rated 11th in effective rush, so most definitely a top 25 rushing attack. Even the passing numbers look pretty good. They're just 114th in effective pass because up until a couple weeks back, they really weren't throwing the ball much. But check it out. Since Malik Williams took over at quarterback, because Luka obviously with the contract or whatever. So Williams is the quarterback now. Since taking over, he's been really efficient throwing the ball. Against Fresno, 13-16, 182 yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks, 119 rush yards. Obviously, he could still run the ball like Sluka can. And against Syracuse, 21 of 25, 227, 3 touchdowns, a pick, and added 53 rush yards. Look at the UNLV passing numbers in the game Sluka started. Just 130 passing yards per game, 7.83 yards per attempt, just 33.8% success rate per dropback. And then look at the passing numbers in the 2 games Williams has started. Fresno and Syracuse, 212.5 passing yards per game, over 10.3 yards per attempt, 75% success rate per dropback. So UNLV already had one of the most dangerous rushing attacks in the country, and now it looks like they've got an explosive passing attack to add to it. So how do they match up against the Utah State defense? Well, this is a bad unit, to put it delicately. I mean, Temple lit them up. Their last 2 games against Temple and Boise State, 303 passing yards per game, 9.4 yards per attempt. Success rate up around 62% per dropback. That's terrible. Here are their defensive numbers on the year. This is certainly one of the worst defenses in the conference, probably the worst Mountain West defense. They're 125th in yards per play, 126th in success rate. Actually, you know what? As I said that, maybe Air Force, but Utah State right down there with them. Look at their numbers against the run. 127th in the country in yards per carry allowed, 123rd in success rate, 130th in effective rush. They're sitting at 120th in DFEI. As we know, this UNLV offensive line's done a great job creating space in the run game, and this Utah State defensive front has done nothing but get blown off the line of scrimmage. 126th in line yards, 110th in stuff rate. I mean, there's no use even continuing talking about this. On paper, UNLV should score on literally every possession against Utah State. As we've learned these past few weeks and over the past few years, college football is most definitely not played on paper, but according to the numbers, according to what we've seen this year, UNLV should have no problem putting up a lot of points against Utah State. On the other side, we got Utah State's offense. This has been a pass-first offense, probably because they've been down on the scoreboard, but they are 27th in pass frequency so far this year. Here are their offensive numbers, and you can see this is the strength of the team. It's crazy to say the strength of a football team is the offense, whose quarterback is Spencer Petras. You might remember him from his days at Iowa. But they are 63rd in the country in yards per play, 94th in success rate, 76th in PPA. Passing numbers looking about middle of the pack, maybe slightly below middle of the pack. 75th in yards per pass attempt, 71st in success rate per dropback, 63rd in effective pass. Spencer Petras' numbers on the year really aren't that bad. Keep in mind he was hurt. He only played in about 2.5 games so far. So 810 passing yards is actually pretty solid for only playing in 2.5 games. 8.2 yards per attempt, 6 touchdowns, 3 interceptions already. But he really hasn't looked that bad. Obviously, playing a Utah State schedule is a lot different than his days with Iowa, playing the Big Ten West. The Utah State passing attack has certainly taken a big step forward now that Petras came back from injuries. Now, I know when you look at these numbers, it looks like the Utah State passing attack has taken this huge step forward with Spencer Petras back. If you look at the games that Barnes started, just 174 yards, 5.4 yards per attempt, 35% success rate, looks pretty bad. Compare that to the numbers where Petras played. I mean, not even comparison. These numbers look great, but look at the opponents. Spencer Petras started against Robert Morris, Temple, and Boise State. Barnes started against Utah and USC. So that certainly explains it. I'm not saying this Utah State offense isn't better with Petras. I mean, clearly that's their starter, but he played much easier opponents. And another thing we have to keep in mind when we're looking at Utah State's numbers here, if we look at their offensive numbers from the last two games, they actually look pretty good. 29.5 points per game in their last two against Temple and Boise State, 6.36 yards per play. That's pretty solid. Over a 40% success rate isn't terrible. So you might look at these and be like, hey, Utah State's offense looks pretty good. What these numbers won't tell you is Boise State was up like 38 points, and Utah State drove up and down the field a couple times in garbage time, making these numbers look much better. So obviously those numbers need to be taken with a little bit of a grain of salt. Now they were competitive in the Temple game, though, so let's give them that. They were competitive in the Temple game, and the offense did look good, but UNLV's defense is definitely not Temple's defense. They're 23rd in the country in yards per play, 45th in success rate, 37th in PPA. Solid against the run, solid against the pass, 38th in DFEI. The only offense that was successfully able to run the ball on UNLV so far was Kansas. Kansas actually ran the ball pretty effectively on them. In fact, Kansas probably should have won that game. Jalen Daniels gifted them some interceptions, and also there was that crazy play before half. But Kansas averaged almost 5.7 yards per carry on UNLV, 46% success rate, almost 200 yards rushing in the game. But look at UNLV's run defense in their other four games. Just 71 rushing yards per game, 2.49 yards per carry, 33% success rate. And okay, Utah Tech's in there. Houston's offense is pretty terrible. But Fresno and Syracuse, I mean, those are impressive defensive performances there. Now, Kyle McCord was able to throw the ball on this UNLV defense, and that's important to point out because, as we mentioned, Utah State is an offense that wants to throw the ball. But Spencer Petras and Utah State is most definitely not Kyle McCord and the Syracuse offense. And also the week before that, they saw Fresno State with Mikey Keene, another offense that's better than Utah State, that has a quarterback that can throw the ball. And he really couldn't do anything until after it was a 30-point game. He ended up racking up some passing yards in garbage time, but they blanketed Mikey Keene. So, look, even though Kyle McCord was throwing the ball on UNLV last week, I don't think Spencer Petras is going to be able to do it. And if you think Utah State's going to be able to run the ball, because Kansas did, let's compare the Kansas rushing attack to Utah State's. Yards per carry, 19th to 127th. Effective rush, 17th to 128th. Yeah, they don't belong even in the same conversation. So although the offense is the strength of this Utah State team, don't have a lot of faith in them here. I mean, in my opinion, on paper, UNLV should win this game by 30-plus points. So that's my pick for this game. UNLV minus 19, minus 19.5, whatever it's at. As long as it's under 20, I'm cool with it. They should run up the score on them. Give me the Rebels next game. Last game up is Utah on the road in Tempe. Arizona State catching 5.5 points at home. Total sitting at 46.5, it looks like. Yeah, mostly 46.5s out there. Look, I'm going to skip this game for now. We'll talk about it on the live show. I'm not doing this again. Do you know how many times I've put together a video for a Utah game with the expectation of Cam Rising playing? I mean, apparently he's going to play. The line is indicative of Cam Rising playing, but I'm not doing it again. Look, if Cam Rising plays and is healthy, then Utah should have no problem throwing the ball in this Arizona State defense. Their last two home games were against Mississippi State and Kansas. Both teams were able to throw the ball on this defense. This Arizona State defense is much stronger against the run, and we've seen it. I mean, this Utah offense is just a completely different beast when Cam Rising's on the field. They're averaging like 21, 22 points a game without him. His entire career there in Utah, they've only failed to score 20 or more points once. His entire career there. So when he's on the field, this Utah offense is just different. They should have no problem scoring on Arizona State, but I'm not doing it. I'm not placing a bet. I don't believe anything Kyle Whittingham says. So until I see him out there, until I get it confirmed that Cam Rising is playing in this game, I'm not going to speak on it. I'm not going to place a bet. We'll talk about it on the live show, 4 p.m. Eastern time. Maybe we have some more information by then. But as of right now, if Cam Rising plays, maybe I'd go over or Utah minus the points. We'll talk about it on the live show. If you'd like to see all the bets I currently have open, head over to KyleKirms.com and click on Open Bets. You'll see all mine as well as everyone on the staff here. Also, if you sign up to Sauce Network Plus, it comes with access to the Discord, and you can participate in the weekly betting league. $150 and one of these trophies go to the winner every single week. So if you're interested, head over to the website and sign up. Let's have ourselves a good one. Looks like tonight's going to be a rough college football night for me. This week started off so promising, too. Hopefully this isn't a turn into darker times. Let's bounce back, grab a couple wins here before the weekend. Please remember to bet responsibly. Talk in the Discord.